My name is Stephen Long, and I host a show here on Rock Candy called Sacred Tension, the podcast about the spiritual discipline of asking questions. We cover topics from LGBT issues to faith and doubt and mental health. We talk to biblical scholars and have conversations about religious abuse and leaving faith and finding it again. We also talk to pastors and skeptics and cult experts who are all sorting out their own journey of faith. Please join me in these conversations on Sacred Tension right here on Rock Candy.
Welcome to the 11ty Life podcast.
What's up, 11ty family? Matt here, and welcome to this week's episode of 11ty Life. I could not be happier that you are here with us. This week I get to sit down with Andrew Schwab, who has a band called Project 86, and we had a really fun conversation together. A few years after I graduated high school, Andrew's band and our band were sharing a lot of the same stages at festivals and shows, sort of within this weird subculture of Christian rock music. I still to this day have no idea why a promoter would put both of our bands on the same stage. We're exactly at opposite ends of the musical spectrum, I feel like, and we actually get to talk about this a lot within today's show, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Hey, a huge thank you to everyone who is supporting this podcast directly by going to the Rock Candy Recordings online store and purchasing literally anything from there. Every time that somebody purchases something, we get a tiny notification that lets us know we are a few dollars closer to paying our Stamps.com membership. I'm just kidding. We get excited because it means that our family is growing, and nothing makes us happier than that. For everybody just tuning into the episode who may not be familiar with what's been happening over the course of the past few that we've put out, we are actually starting to play shows again. And what started out as us just planning on doing one sort of comeback show has turned into two of them. So now we're going to be in Columbia, South Carolina on April 19th, and we're going to be in Greenville, South Carolina on April 20th on the good old 420. Yes, that's right, folks. Legalize 11ty. Oh, also something I'm not even supposed to be talking about yet. We actually have a festival booked for this summer that we can't wait to tell you about. I will give you more information on that as soon as we get everything sort of finalized and locked in and all those deets worked out. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. Big hugs and high fives to everybody who is hanging out at the 11ty Life Facebook group. Man, what a kind and generous and sweet group of people over there. You guys are continually amazing me with the love that you show for each other over there. Okay, I promise we're going to get to the episode with Andrew, but check this out. We have some brand new Rock Candy and 11ty merch items that are being created right now, right here in the good old US of A, that we can't wait to tell you about, because one of them in particular, a lot of you have been asking for a long time, and I don't know why we're not listening to you and giving you what you want, because we're hard to get along with, and we're not very good listeners apparently, but we're trying to make this right, and we can't wait to tell you about this brand new thing that we're working on. So yeah, if you can read between the lines on that one, awesome. If not, good for you for having a life. All right, so here we go. Without further ado, Andrew Schwab from Project 86. Here is our conversation.
Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
And can you see me, or is your camera on?
I can see you. I didn't turn my camera on. Do you want it?
It's helpful. Unless you're just like ass naked.
No, but are we recording video?
No. None of the video stuff gets used, only the audio stuff. Okay, cool.
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Dude, yeah. Thanks for Skyping in on a Thursday at noon.
Yeah, well, it's 9 for me.
Where are you?
I'm in California.
Ah, okay. Do you live there?
I do.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I don't know why. Anytime I think about like hardcore hard rock bands, it conjures images of just like Indiana, Illinois. Yeah. But there's that. Dude, what are you so what are you up to today besides doing the Skype stuff?
Working on my own podcast.
Okay.
Just recording some episodes and editing. Keeping busy.
Do you do like extensive amounts of editing for your podcast, or do you just kind of grab the conversation and then let it be what it is?
It depends. I try not to edit a ton if it's a conversation. If it's something I'm recording, because my podcast, I alternate. I'll have a guest and then I'll do an episode by myself. It's something by myself. I guess I don't edit it a ton. I just will record it until it's not bad.
What's the what does that finish line look like for you? Like, how do you know if it's not bad? Is it like, because the thing is, like, when we're doing the podcast, I'll always like, if there's at least something interesting in the conversation, I'll feel like, oh yeah, cool. Like that's something worth putting out. If it just feels like rambling or like nobody's kind of getting into the flow, a lot of times we'll just scrap the episode.
I'm totally content driven. Okay. And so I'm 100% anti-rambling. If it's an episode by myself, I've written the entire thing, so I'm mostly just reading it.
Oh wow! Okay, so you like script out episodes.
And if it's a guest, I have a point and a theme and a linear path I'm trying to go down, because I listen to podcasts a lot, and most of them I end up not listening to after the first 5 or 10 minutes because it's just boring. So I try to make sure that every minute is content driven and relevant, not just dudes talking about whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, just because I know myself as a podcast listener, I give a lot of podcasts a try.
Yeah.
But most of them don't stick. It's kind of like Netflix shows.
Yep. There's some shit on Netflix right now.
Yeah, I think Netflix in general, like if you're to take the median level of the programming, most shows are mediocre. And there's a few that are really great. And that's true with anything, with any art, any podcast, any music. You know, the special ones are few and far between. So I'm always, with my media consumption, I'm always on the search for something special to me. And usually that's difficult to find.
Well, what are the kind of things, are you recording on your end?
I was just asking you that. No, I can if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I normally make a point to grab everything because I like all of the weird little bits of like all the in between stuff. I usually find uses for it somehow. But yeah, I like all of the. If things are going great, awesome. If it's going really awkward, I kind of love all of it.
Do you want to officially start it with some sort of intro?
No,
or
we don't do that. Like that. We just talk.
Okay. Shall I hit record?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay, we're live. We're good.
So you were talking about this, like what would it be, like the 80-20 rule of art
I wish it was 20%. That would be amazing.
So what do you think it is?
2% probably.
Oh my God.
Maybe 5. But everybody has a different filter. Everybody has a different, I don't know, quality control standard. I'm not a snob about anything that I do, whether it's drinking coffee or watching Netflix shows. But I inevitably only like certain things, right? And that's everybody. Yeah. Some people have a wider palette, I guess, when it comes to consuming whatever they're consuming. For me, I've learned at this point in my life, like there's certain things that I really like and certain things that I'm looking for in any given genre of media or any type of consumption whatsoever. Like I only like certain kinds of potato chips or brands, if you will. You know?
Yeah. Okay. So what is it? So how well do you know yourself? Like, do you know that there's like a specific genre of movies that, like, as you're scrolling through Netflix, you're like, okay, you know, that I know that if this person's in this movie, I'm probably going to be able to tolerate it. Or if it's this premise, or if it's like a crime drama, or if it's like Making a Murderer kind of documentary kind of stuff, like what do you gravitate towards?
I think if we're talking about films or shows, it's either story driven, content driven, or actor driven. Yeah. But there's a very small amount of actors that will pull me into a premise or an idea for a show or a film where I trust it.
Yeah.
and it's a very small list. It's a very small list. So for example, if I know Daniel Day-Lewis is making a film.
Oh, absolutely.
I will watch it. that goes for a lot of people.
He was in this movie called Phantom Thread semi-recently, and
I didn't see that one.
I saw the cover art and I was like, oh my God, no, this is totally not my bag. But then I saw that it was Daniel Day-Lewis and I was like, I'll give it a shot, just because he strikes me as the kind of person that takes his craft so seriously that I will gravitate towards somebody that, even if I don't like what they do or I'm just not a fan of the style, if I know that they have a reputation for giving everything they have to something, I'm kind of all about it. Whether it's Daniel Day-Lewis or like watching Fail Army on YouTube.
I mean, and that's a good way to build your reputation as an artist, right?
Yeah.
It's because you're constantly putting out a perception for your own reputation, for whatever you do. And so if you gain the reputation of just going for it in everything that you do and putting your all into it and therefore producing quality work, especially if it's across multiple genres, across multiple mediums, whatever, you know, the trust that you have for that artist is a lot greater than, for example, I watched Bird Box.
I'm sorry.
I'm not a huge Sandra Bullock fan, but I couldn't not watch Bird Box.
I got in so much trouble with my wife because I was just talking shit about Sandra Bullock the entire time. and for no reason. Like, I've never met her ever. Like, I cannot speak to her character or the quality of, like, if she's a cool person, if she's a good hang, you know. I just, there's something about her that when she's on screen, it irritates the hell out of me. And it's not her fault. It just, and maybe it's something I need to dig into. Maybe there's something that I'm projecting onto her that I don't like about myself, not to get too meta about it. But yeah, I just would not stop ripping on her the entire movie. And finally she looks over at me and she's like, you are ruining this for me.
I have those people in popular culture too that are the opposite, where if I see them attached to something, I automatically don't watch.
Carrot Top.
Unless I want to get really upset.
Right.
I have those
so these are like your trigger celebrities. Who would be some of your trigger celebrities?
Gosh, I don't know if I want to say.
Assuming they're never going to listen to our podcast.
I'd like to keep it positive. You know what I mean? It's very easy for me to descend into this realm of things that piss me off or things that frustrate me.
Oh, why?
That's just how my mind works. It's very easy for me to go off on a rant. I have a filter, a self-imposed filter, for example, on Twitter, where I try to only post things that are engaging from a thought-provoking perspective, or something that's relatively helpful for people or positive, because it's so easy for me to talk about things that frustrate me or talk about things that I don't like or talk about those types of things. And then it just descends into negativity.
So why do you think that comes so easily for you? That's something I'm really interested in. Yeah.
I think it has to do with the human condition, and I'm just really in touch with it in myself. Pain produces response.
Okay.
So when you are writing a song or you're creating a piece of art, I always gravitate towards dissonance. So anything in my life that is a source of frustration or a source of regret or guilt or a mistake, a problem that I'm facing, those are very easy things to write about because you naturally have emotions about those things. And this is why I don't talk about politics or even faith that much on my podcast, because it's very easy to create dissonance when you discuss controversial topics like those. And I get very opinionated, and then inevitably I alienate half of my audience. So I try to keep it on the positive and on the helpful, but when it comes to producing my own art, dissonance is a big factor.
Okay.
And so this is a great example. So for consumption purposes, I also tend to gravitate towards art that is dissonant, right? I just finished watching The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. Great show.
Loved it.
Great show. But the feeling produced in me was one of dread the whole time I was watching, because I was just anticipating the next thing that was going to make me terrified.
Is that fun? Do you find that fun?
I find it engaging.
Okay.
So when I watch a film or I watch a show, I want to be captivated to the point where I forget the cares of everyday existence.
You want to get lost in the reality of the art.
I want to get lost in it. And I find that dissonant art is what captivates me. And so a lot of the art that I create is dissonant in some form because that is the type of art I consume that captivates me. Now, that's not to say I don't watch or listen to anything that's uplifting or happy endings or joyful even. There are certain things that produce joy in me, but I don't always necessarily gravitate towards that.
But what are the things that produce? Okay, here's a good question. When's the last time you felt pure, unadulterated, cannot not smile right now joy?
It wasn't necessarily consuming something. It was spending time with my kids. We play a game together called it's hard to explain.
No, it's not. Go for it.
My son is 5 and he's still at this point in life where he knows vocabulary, but he puts his own twist onto words.
Yeah.
So Santa comes down a chimney, right?
Right.
He doesn't say chimney. He says Chingley.
Okay.
And so around Christmas time, we created this game called Chingley.
Okay.
Where I build a fort, and at the top of the fort, there's a hole in the fort where the blankets are separated.
Yeah.
On the floor, there's carpeting, and we also put pillows down. And my daughter, who's a little older, she's 8, calls it support. It's support for Chingley. And so that's when someone comes down the Chingley, they don't kill themselves when they hit the bottom of the Chingley.
I love that.
And so what I do is I take the kids and I put them down head first down the Chingley, and then they fall down the Chingley onto the pillows. And that's the game they always want to play.
That sounds mad. I would love to play that game right now.
And another game that's even more fun is called Burrito. And it's kind of like Chingley, but we take the blankets from the fort and we spread them out on the floor flat. And the children, kids, my kids, become the meat in the burrito. Yeah. But there's also other ingredients in the burrito, pillows, and they represent beans, rice, guacamole, whatever. And so I wrap them up really tight in the burrito with the pillows surrounding them.
Right.
And I dump them over the back of the couch onto the floor. And so they love that game. It's an amazing game. So that's pure unadulterated joy that has absolutely no dissonance besides the fear that they have that I'm going to drop them on their heads.
It sounds awesome. Like I can't stop feeling happy just thinking about like kids having a fun time going down the Chingley.
Oh, I have friends who are adult men who want to play burrito with me.
Are you? Do you find yourself ever kind of filling that role within your band dynamic of kind of being band dad, or because you and I have both been doing this for a long time, but you admittedly have probably been doing it longer than I have. Because I remember listening to your band when I was in high school, and I always wonder, like when you're in a band for so many years, like it's almost like a marriage. Like you can't imagine what somebody else's like 15th year of marriage is like, you know, until you've gone through those steps in there. And that's the way I describe it to other people, is like, you know, those dynamics change, like people come and go. Do you find that you kind of take on the more fatherly role, or what does that look like for you?
I wear a couple of different hats specifically that are self-imposed. One is that driver of the vision, the band leader role. That gets really tiresome and boring. So I tend to play this opposite role simultaneously where I'm the entertainer. So I had this discussion with a guest that I had on the podcast a few episodes ago, where we were describing a game that nobody knows about that guys in bands play. And this takes place in every band in some form. And that is driven by the madness of travel and how much time you spend alone with these other guys. Yep. So just your group in whatever vehicle you're traveling in, or in whatever green room or backstage room that you're in, where all the dead space occurs on tour. Yep. And this is why there are two reasons why most people are not cut out for constant travel, either in the band world or some other entertainment or business field. Okay. When you're working in a group setting and most of your time is consumed with travel and being away from home, it's maddening. There's so much boredom and space that you need to fill. Yeah. And some people are better at filling that space than other people, but it is maddening.
Yeah.
The other factor that makes only crazy people capable of touring in a band or doing something like that is the time spent away from home reliving the same day of your life over and over again.
Yeah.
So the Groundhog Day element. And so inevitably you have all this boredom and dead space that you're trying to fill. So for me over the years, how I try to fill that dead space, whether it's in a hotel room, whether it's at a green room at a venue, on a tour bus or in a van, the game that I play is who can be the most offensive. And I always win this game.
Oh my God. I was so hoping you would say that.
And I always start the game as well.
Yes.
And the goal of the game is just to get a reaction.
Yes.
It's just to make human beings who don't feel like human beings anymore feel like human beings again.
Yes.
By making them laugh, by making them angry, by making them react in some form. And so this can take many different roads, this game.
Okay.
And sometimes it's as benign as just saying something really gross or disgusting.
Yeah.
Or using language that you don't normally use around your grandmother, your mother, your children.
Yes.
It involves YouTube videos. It involves stories. It involves anything you can do to produce a reaction.
Yeah.
It also involves inventing weird games or competitions. There's so many examples, and it's endless. It's a game that never ends.
Yeah.
And so the real fun comes in when you have someone with you who's from a different band or who doesn't normally travel with you.
Because they have a whole other set of stories and vulgarity to be able to throw into the mix.
And they don't always ascribe to the same type of humor.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it's much easier to get a reaction from someone outside of your current culture. Now, if you throw in the fact that they're from a different part of the country or they're from a different belief system, or they're from a different country itself, it's so much more fun to play this game because you can get a reaction just sheerly based upon the cultural divide. I had a moment last summer where we were playing some shows with a band from Norway, and we had traded some vehicle membership. Like people were driving with other people from the band.
Yeah, that's a great way to mix it up when you're on the road.
Yeah, and I said some things that offended a few of the Norwegians that were with us because they don't use the same words to describe certain things. And so and don't misunderstand me here. It's not like I'm just arbitrarily dropping an F-bomb every other word or something like that. These are like culturally specific words that could offend.
Right.
And so, but in the context of my band and the people I'm friends with, these are not offensive words or phrases.
Right.
They're just things that we say, maybe not around other people, but they're just things that we say to one another. And so I used some terminology that sparked a 1-hour conversation and produced some really great, serious dialogue about culture. Okay,
so you became a cultural hero by offending Swedes.
Norwegians.
Okay.
Don't call them Swedes. They get very upset at that.
Okay. So have you ever taken this game so far that the damage that you did was irreparable?
There's never damage. That's the beauty of it.
Okay.
The damage is so short term, if anyone ever does get upset, that it produces a new level of interpersonal relationship depth.
Okay.
Because you end up talking about why you got offended by a certain thing or why something bummed you out.
Yes.
And if for some reason I'm in the wrong, then I think about it and I'm like, oh, do I need to change this about my character? Do I need to change this about how I see the world?
Yeah.
Well, maybe 1 or 2 times that's happened.
Yeah.
So
I kind of love that. We had pretty much the exact same game. It was like the second that we would get in the van, it was just we would fabricate just elaborate profanities, almost like their Street Fighter 2 combos of just like strings of words put together, or come up with stories, or we would have these like we would do voices. So we would have characters that we would sort of develop over the course of different tours. And the funny thing was like when we would tour with other bands, we would find that they were all doing the exact same things. Like everybody feels so isolated in that sardine can on the interstate, but it's so weird that everybody also kind of gravitates individually to doing the exact same things. No matter what band they're in or kind of where they are on the planet. I always find that kind of fascinating. One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was you say that you really enjoy like being in this dissonance and that you feel like you create or you're drawn to that sort of dissonance because it's where a lot of your art flows from. I wonder if as you've gotten older, do you find yourself being less offended by things?
Yeah, you naturally become increasingly desensitized to the world around you the more you consume it, right? The more you digest it, the more experiences you accumulate. Yeah. And so, for example, when I was young, I was probably the most sensitive kid that I knew when it came to anything scary. Yeah. In terms of movies or even music videos, I was always extremely affected by visuals that I deemed as disturbing. Yeah. Or scary in some form. And so I naturally tried to stay away from things that would give me nightmares. Right. But inevitably, there was that part of me that couldn't look away if something was on television. I remember the first time I was probably 5 years old, I saw Michael Jackson's Thriller video. And when he turns into the werewolf, I was terrified. And when he becomes the zombie and all the zombies are dancing, you know, I was legitimately scared of that as a young person. And I couldn't look away, but I also never wanted to watch that again because I knew it would scare me. Yeah. Now, as an adult, it's like I'm not into horror films as a genre per se. Yeah. I'm not drawn to gore. I love psychological, emotional tension, though. Yes. So thrillers are my favorite. No pun intended. But I think as you age, and especially in media-driven culture, your desensitization to media, especially today, is greatly accelerated. So it takes the same amount of transactions, but because we are processing through so many more transactions living in a digital age, the desensitization process is a lot quicker in terms of time.
See, that's actually something else that I'm kind of interested. I feel like you and I are similar in so many different ways that I did not expect that we would be. Maybe because like we make music on the exact opposite ends of the spectrum.
See, your music is super lighthearted. Maybe you can characterize it better than I can, but it doesn't take itself very seriously. You know what I mean? I feel like it's almost it's a representation of me as an individual. Like it's almost like this expression of my value set in the same way that like it seems like the dissonance is kind of part of where you find your value set for the art that you make. Like it is so important to me to find the goofiest thing about. I didn't want to use the word goofy because I don't know if that's an offensive word for you, but for me, I'm not comfortable enough in my own skin to allow the goofy parts of my personality to come out publicly.
Oh, why?
And so
Andrew, why?
I reserve those for my very close friends and my kids and people that I know very well. For whatever reason, when I started down this road with making my own music, I was at a point in my life where I was drawn to darker music, more serious type of music. And I think a lot of the people that make the kind of music that would be classified in similar genres as to Project 86 would, if they're honest, express something similar, that there's something awkward and uncomfortable about putting yourself out there in that type of vulnerability. I think for me, I have a sense of humor, but it comes out differently in my art than maybe it does for you. It's always subtle in mine, or I will movie lines from The Big Lebowski in a very, very serious song. Because that's funny to me. Or when we're on stage, instead of trying to make the audience laugh, I'm always trying to make my band members laugh on stage in a way that the audience doesn't know. So I sneak in lyrics into songs that are totally different than what the actual lyric is, that are close enough to the actual lyric that the audience doesn't skip a beat. But when my band hears it, I'm trying to get them to stop playing, to get them to mess up in some form. And they do that to me as well.
Yeah.
Like, we have a lot of gang vocals and backups and things happening in our songs on really focal moments in the song. You know, a lot of bands do this where the hook moment is, you know, you're spoon feeding the audience, right? You're saying, this is the part you sing along to, and everybody chants this lyric. You know, sometimes that comes off as contrived because so many bands do that. But I think Project has been good over the years at not producing those moments in a contrived manner. Like, this is naturally something that the audience wants to sing along with.
I would agree with that. From what I've seen, here's what I wanted to ask you though, before we get too far away from it. Tell me what would be the worst thing that could happen if you were to share the goofiest parts of yourself publicly. Like, I'm interested in this.
I don't think anything would happen to me per se. Like, I don't fear embarrassment. I don't fear what are these people going to think of me if I'm, you know, running through the room in my underwear and filming it.
Right.
It's not this thing where I have this inherent thin skin when it comes to stuff. I'm actually the opposite. Yeah. Like, I will do things that most people won't do publicly because it puts other people on the defense. Right. So we played a show with 5 Iron Frenzy, of all people, a couple of years ago on New Year. And when the New Year's struck, 5 Iron Frenzy was on stage. Yeah. So I went up on stage and I kissed Reese on the mouth for New Year's. Because I knew it would get a reaction and people would think that I would do something like that. Yeah. And so don't get me wrong when I say that. But I think as an artist, there's a perception you create, and you are in many ways in control of that. You want to create a perception that either is totally inaccurate and fictitious because it supports the art that you're making, or you want to create a perception that is hyper real. You know what I mean? So
is creating that like, what's the point of creating that perception? Do you feel like that's part of your artistry or part of your ego that you sort of like?
I think music itself is driven by perception.
Okay.
So we're in sales jobs. People don't know that, but when you signed up to play music for a living, you signed up for a sales job. Right. And if you handle the administrative part of it, you also signed up for a desk job. Okay. The time you spent creating and performing is minuscule compared to time you spend doing administration and sales. Yes. So rock and roll or music is about perception. And so the perception you create in people's minds should support the art that you're putting out into the world in some form. And so the extent I believe to which that you are intentional about creating whatever perception that you want to create that supports your art will help define how that art sells to people and define whether or not you're able to make a living producing that art. Yeah. Because especially it's different in visual media. Like if you're a visual artist, people care less about what you're doing as a human being with your time as they do about just that visual piece of work that you put into the world. Rock and roll is not like that. Yeah. It's the intermingling of the persona that you create with the music that you create that produces success. And sometimes when they fire on all cylinders, they can produce a result that is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so this is interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like I'm constantly with my art trying to be the thing that I felt like I needed growing up that I never got. Which was therapy. Yeah, it's therapy. I need somebody to walk into the room and do something so stupid that they just shatter the illusion that we're all important and that we're all more important than each other, and that some people make more money and some people are cooler and some people fit into this thing and that thing. And it's just like, no, if you can take the bar and just lower it down here to where everybody can be a part of it, everybody can be included. Like there's no standard. You don't have to be or become a thing to fit into this space. I feel like those are the kinds of things those are the kind of attitude that we're always kind of trying to do. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were
reminiscing about this specific genre of music that I feel like I would consider you to be a figurehead of. And we're like, because you had hit on this earlier in our conversation, I'm like, there is this weird sort of seriousness or solemnity to it that like pop punk doesn't have, that like EDM sort of doesn't have, that but it's almost like it's more real, it's more honest than what you're getting like in pop or like contemporary music. But then there's also, to me, it always felt like I couldn't be serious enough for the bands.
Definitely. And don't get me wrong, the somber, serious nature of darker, heavier music, right? And so the metal world is even more extreme. Yes. Because I wouldn't consider Project 86 to be a metal band. Right. We touch on elements of that, but we're definitely not a metal band. Right. We're not from the metal scene. But I have a lot of friends who are in metal bands. Yeah. And very goofy human beings outside of the context of their art, but within the context of their music, there's a serious element to it. But the more serious it is, the more easy it is to make fun of, right? And so yes, I'm a caricature of myself and have been for years, especially early catalog Project 86. People are very familiar with, the first couple of few project records, really up through, Spy Hunter. Yeah. Even in our newer catalog, Fall Goliath Fall is a very popular song. A lot of people know that song. Yeah. And so there's a serious nature to it. And that definitely speaks to my personality and guys' personalities that make this kind of music. But don't let anyone fool you, and don't let me fool you. I'm not a serious human being all the time. Right. It's just that for whatever reason, the music I listen to, the films I watch, the media I consume is usually not of this always a lighthearted nature. Now, I love comedy. Yeah. I love comedy. I love the social commentary element of comedy. The idea that, the jokes that resonate or that are offensive are very much documents of the space that we occupy as human beings in history right now. You know what I'm saying? And so I would say that the word is contemplative. Like that is sort of the space that I reside in a lot, is contemplative. I'm either naturally gravitating towards something contemplative or intentionally avoiding contemplation. Yes. And so that does comprise this other side.
You're still creating dissonance.
That's where the comedy resides for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Is that intentional avoidance of contemplation. I don't want to take my life seriously at this moment. I want something that's going to distract me from all the serious things that I need to face right now. And so even that, though, plays into heavier music, darker music, art, whatever. There's a fantasy element to it, right? Yeah. You want to transport the listener into a fantasy realm that exists in their imagination, so far removed from their own struggle to pay bills, their own struggles with relationship. I hate the word struggle. Their own difficulties in those realms. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, dude, I totally get that. I think I'm fascinated in this, that I feel like you and I seem to be very much drawn to the same things. Like I actually do like horror, but I like it because it feels like everything's on steroids. It's not like so-and-so falls in love with so-and-so. It's like lives are at stake, humanity's at stake. Like I need a high stakes game.
It's not real either.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so far from reality that it's comedic almost. Horror is so close to being comedy. Yeah. Yes. And comedy is so close to being horror. Yeah. If you listen to some of these comedians that, their shtick is pushing buttons, and just saying things that are offensive.
I kind of feel like
one step away from horror.
Yeah. This is something that I feel like we have conversations about all the time, is like, I don't know why people don't see offense as like the greatest way of staring inside of someone, because like to the degree that I take offense to the things happening around me, the more miserable of a person I am. But it's also like it's a really quick way to get to an important place in therapy. Like if you're into that,
Definitely.
it's like what offends you. Cool. That means there's something here that we can sort of deconstruct and figure it out.
I'm glad that you didn't say unpack.
Oh God.
I'm tired of the word unpack. People use that word constantly.
You mean Christians
and I get
use that word constantly?
Yes. I do not like the word unpack.
Yes.
Because I don't, it's been used too much. I don't like.
Yeah.
And I honestly, let's be totally honest here. Can we just be honest for the rest of our conversation
I hope
here?
you're that way all the time.
Words that Christians use a lot, I tend to gravitate away from.
Yes. It somehow makes it weird. Like when Christians start using a word an awful lot, they're kind of like that kid on the playground that just learned a new word and overuses it in every sentence. Yeah, it's rough.
Definitely. So deconstructing is a good word. And I think that it's this idea that if you throw the ball or the whatever heavy metal object into the pack of dogs, the one that barks the loudest was the one that was hit by the ball or by the thing that you threw, right? And so, that concept of when someone is offended or reacts to something, there's something there. Yeah. What you just said, there's something there. And so, we don't need to devolve this into a discussion of Christian culture or anything like that. But I find
that you have something to say. You take offense to that.
When folks are unbalanced and are reacting publicly to express something that they're having a hard time with, that they're taking a stance against, that they are, angry about some other person not being vocal enough about, that there's something there that's wrong.
Right.
And it's not the surface thing that like, well, so-and-so is not behaving like a person of faith or not behaving like a Christian or not representing God in their whatever thing that they're doing. I find that when that occurs, almost every single time there's something off with that individual in that moment that has nothing to do with me.
Right. But that they more than likely have a spiritual explanation for, or that somebody else wants to explain away spiritually. Like you and I, literally the last time I saw you was when the Jelly Rocks played a show with you guys in Greenville, South Carolina. And we opened up for Project on that show. And I think we had like merch set up next to one another. But you and I have never we've played tons of festivals with you guys, shared the stage with you guys at a ton of different places. And just, we've never been able to sit down like this and connect and talk. Because we're, on show day, you're so far up your own ass.
You're usually in your own element, and there's so many factors at play that require it to be that way. And it's especially a function of the world in which we live in music now, because music is such a difficult hustle. Yeah. So you have to be on your game 110% all the time. And really, if there's any time to socialize, it's an extension of your work.
Right. And it feels like work.
Yeah, and you're networking with other artists that you're hoping to collaborate with in some form, tour with, play shows with, connect with, develop a rapport with.
Oh, does that not feel so icky? That I've always hated that. I always just wanted to be like, no, let's just hang out here in catering. If a conversation happens naturally, let's trust it. If it feels really forced, then everybody walks away from that with so many more questions about the experience they just had than just being able to sit down and like have a couple beers and just talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. I don't know. It always felt forced for us. We were not good at hustling. We were not good at kissing ass.
That stuff only has happened for me when the show's over and the day's over.
Yes.
And usually that only happens within the confines of whatever tour package we're on, or if we happen to be in the same city and we do know some guys that are in another band they're playing, if we decide to get together after the show and go get food or hang out, whatever. But yes, what you're getting at is something that has always bothered me as well. Yeah. I just don't know how to totally change it other than to just change myself, because the culture is what it is. But that is, every band on a festival or every band in the music space is competing with one another.
Yes.
attention, for sales, for who had the greatest show on the stage, etc. And so it really makes it as such that genuine relationships and friendships don't usually occur because so much of your being is wrapped up into promoting and developing your own brand, so that therefore there really isn't space in the music industry for friendships a lot of times. And I'm really trying to in whatever realm I have control over, destroy that.
Yes.
Because yes, we can all accept that we're all competing to make a living doing this thing, because it's very difficult to do. And because of the state of the world in which we live, i.e. the digital realm in which we live, in the way that communication artifacts and media in general has been devalued. Music is the obvious one. People used to buy albums, then they bought CDs, and then it became they bought a single on iTunes or a record on iTunes, and now it's streaming. And artists don't make money off of streaming, and the public doesn't buy music. And we all have this thing in us now where we demand music to be free or a part of our $10 a month streaming package. Right. And so it's only the most dedicated fans of your band that actually pay for stuff. And it's made, and people don't go to shows anymore because they're lazy. They want to be on their smartphones, on their couch, or in a comfortable chair watching Netflix. It's hard to get people to go to shows. And we're so inundated with content creators now. Like everybody has a podcast. Sorry. Both have one. So we're both in this category. Everybody has a podcast. Everybody has a band. Everybody has something they're trying to launch in the public sphere. Everybody has a social media profile. Everybody has 5 social media profiles. And so the noise is insane to get people to pay attention to whatever you're doing, even if you're an established brand with a great reputation, is entirely difficult.
Do you feel like you're handling all of that in a healthy way? And I say that because this is a constant struggle for me in that, I have my hands in a whole lot of different stuff and making records and working on music all the time. But I'm not that person who has this like super elevated public persona that I live into. Like I very much would rather dial back all of those things and still be a real person, so that when I am in front of people are like, they at least have my best attempt at realness to connect with. And it's not just connecting with this elevated clown of a thing. It's like, no, this is actually me in real life. I'm pretty goofy. I have anxiety pretty severely. I'm trying to figure out a lot of different stuff, and it helps me to do some of that publicly and a lot of it privately. And I feel like I'm constantly moving that line. Like I don't know exactly where the line is. I feel like some days it's healthier to have it closer to me, and some days it's like, oh no, we can do a lot of stuff.
And so are you asking in terms of psychological or mental health or processing emotional?
Maybe a little bit of all of it. Like, do you
difficulty
feel like
within wearing so many hats? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but
asking?
So like, how do you deal with those sorts of things? Like, do you set boundaries for yourself in terms of how engaged you are with all these different things that you're talking about? Like, so social media and profiles and being a part of the noise.
I have to engage the audience, and most of us who are content creators have to engage the audience on a daily basis. And so my day usually begins with strategizing in some form about how I'm going to engage my audience. Now, how I process through daily stress and pressure to earn a living doing things that I've always, on the level that I have been on as an artist in terms of my success, I've always just barely made it. So I wake up every day with the stress of how will the bills get paid this month? It's very rare that there's a month that goes by where, I'm good. I did this thing. I put out a record. I'm comfortable at this moment. I'm never comfortable. So every day I have to wake up strategizing. And it's very easy to get lost in the glass half empty views. Like, am I ever going to get ahead doing any of these things? I've achieved a level of success that keeps me doing it because I love it. But I've never reached this level of success to where I'm comfortable or I own property or I can confidently say, yeah, I'm going to retire, anytime soon. None of that is happening in my world. So I wake up every day with, yes, a sense of dissonance where I'm questioning everything, all the decisions that I've made along the way. Did I choose the right career path, etc.? These are thoughts that I have regularly. The way I manage that in a healthy manner is I set realistic goals.
Yep.
I develop attainable strategies or systematic strategies that are linear, that have quantifiable marks that I can reach.
Yes.
Right? Things that are achievable each day, to where I know when I reach the end of the day, if I execute this list of things and I do them to the best of my ability, I can go to bed at least knowing I did my very best to be faithful to what I had on my plate on that day.
Yes.
So, but getting back to the engagement of my audience versus balancing a persona, a long time ago, Mystique died.
Okay.
I built my entire reputation as an artist on the idea of Mystique. What is up with that guy? Who is that guy? Within the context of Project 86, on stage, off stage, there was always an intention to, and that gets back to our original discussion about the perception creating reality in terms of success in a lot of ways with your band. I always have been of the opinion that the art that I love consuming are the ones where the artist takes a backseat to the art. And so that's always very intentional. We are going to be mysterious, not because we're quantifiably mysterious in and of who we are, but because we want whatever world that we're creating with our art to speak the loudest, and we don't want to distract from that. Wow. I love that. I love not being a distraction. However, about 10 years ago, it became very clear that if you don't engage your audience in some personal way, you will lose your audience. And so I contemplated starting a podcast for 5 years. I had all these great ideas and I was like, is this going to lift the veil too much? And then finally, I concluded that no, this is a medium that I will enjoy so much and I will also be good at. When you say lift the veil, do you mean in terms of like feeling like you're giving away too much of yourself personally to an unhealthy degree? Giving away too much in terms of me as an artist. Yeah. And my conclusion was no. So one of the things that we do, and this is my shameless plug for my podcast. Yeah. Pioneers Podcast, Finding Your Creative Voice. The drive for my podcast is, one, I can't just be another podcast because there's too much noise. There's too many of them. Yep. There's too many dudes from bands doing podcasts about dudes in bands or conversing with dudes in bands. Which is what we're doing now, but that's okay. I brought you on my podcast to talk shit about my podcast, Andrew. Thank you. That's box checked. That is goal achieved here. However, how many hundreds of episodes have you done of this podcast? By the time yours comes out, I think it will be possibly 80 something. So you are a long ways down the road of the type of podcast. We are quite a ways down the road. Yeah. That I am too late to the party to be a part of. It's not that I don't find guys in bands talking to one another about band stuff compelling. It is compelling. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of people doing it. And so I can't do that and hope to rise above the noise. Yeah. And this speaks into why I'm doing this podcast, because we're all trying to rise above the noise. We're all trying to be heard and to be able to tell our story in such a way so that someone will listen. Yeah. Well, my opinion on that is the only way you can do that is if you develop your own voice, that you find your own niche, you identify the hole in the market and you exploit that hole in the market in such a way that you are the best one doing it, that you're a pioneer in exploiting that hole in the market. Yeah. And another way to say that is finding your creative voice, finding your unique voice in culture to present who you are to the world. And so that search is what my podcast is about. And I bring on other self-made, self-taught creatives, not just music people, but creatives. And understandably, on the front end of my podcast, I'm 10 episodes in. Yeah. I only have brought on music people that some way are identified with the faith based realm. And so we've had Matt from August Burns Red. We've had Maddie Mullins from Memphis Mayfire. We've had Toby from Emery and Bad Christian.
Yeah.
We've had Ryan Clark from Demon Hunter. And so these bands and these artists invariably cross paths and are identified by my audience. But as this podcast grows, I want people outside the faith-based audience. I want other types of creators and innovators and entrepreneurs and brand identity personas, right?
Yeah.
Who have learned how to rise above the noise in culture to create their own voice for whatever it is that they're doing. Because I think that there is a lot to be gleaned from people who have been successful in it, in learning about their process, their creative process, their strategy, their voice within it.
Oh yeah, that's like it's one. I feel like for me, it's really fulfilling to talk with, and this is why this podcast for us is like halfway therapy, half audience engagement, half self-actualization in real time sort of project for us. But like, I love hearing how other people are going through that creative process. I love hearing about all the struggles that they go through. I love hearing about their weird neuroses that they experience when they're writing songs, when they're trying to figure out what the next step is, when they're trying to juggle like, oh my God, I have to make rent, I have bills to pay, I have kids, like, and I have all of this. And then at the same time, I also have an audience I have to stay in front of, and how they handle things like that anxiety, or maybe they're giving into it. Maybe I'm literally, I feel like we've had some people on the show before where I listen to the conversation after the fact and I think I'm literally watching them like have a meltdown about all the things that we're talking about, but I'm the same way. And I feel like I kind of like, if I can have a little bit of a meltdown with them, it somehow does exactly like what we were talking about earlier in our conversation, which is like lower that bar of like, there's no illusion here. Like we're just people trying to do something that matters, trying to glean purpose and meaning by creating art, trying to wrangle this pixie dust floating out in the universe and make something better than what it was. Yeah. So I resonate with all the things, like all of those different things that you're hitting on, like, and also I don't know what the best way of saying it is, but my heart goes out to you because I feel like I live in that weird sort of anxiety state of I've been doing this for so long, but the success that I'm experiencing doesn't look like a bank account, and it doesn't look like, it doesn't look like a high rise in New York City. It doesn't look like huge album advances, and it doesn't look like world tours. And I don't know. I think about that kind of stuff a lot because I also think like, well, I don't necessarily know if I want those things. I think in some way I'm also kind of happy with whatever level of anonymity that I have. And that's easy to say, being somebody who's never reached whatever, if you consider that to be success, having reached that. But I also am not convinced, even after all of this, that like people are made for celebrity, to be celebrity.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. Absolutely
not. I think that our culture's obsession with celebrity produces mental health problems in people. And I think that anytime you see celebrity playing itself out, especially in the faith realm, in Christianity, in Christian culture, in churches, most often the fruit is bad. And so
the fruit is bad.
You can apply this to mega churches. Yep. You can apply this to Christian music. You can apply this to worship as a thing, a phenomenon in and of itself. Yep. And that's a whole other discussion. Actually, on my podcast, I purposely try to avoid political and spiritual discussion for the most part. I only engage in such things as it relates specifically to creative process, because I just don't know if good things come out of it, man. Like, I'm not saying bad things come out of talking about politics or talking about God. Absolutely not. But in the realm of promoting a brand and trying to grow an audience, that can be very tenuous. And at the end of the day, I find that and this gets back to something else you said that I want to touch on, because You're actually touching on things, whether you know it or not, that are super important to me. And it's very interesting that you're saying certain buzzwords, but
let's unpack that, Andrew.
Let's unpack that. The idea of, wow, we've already touched on so many things in that last paragraph that we could go down a lot of different roads. You're the host of this, so you guide the conversation here. I was going to say, though, you've used the word therapy a couple of different times. Yes. You've used it in connection to your creative process. Yes. I am a huge believer in the idea that not only is the number one function of art or music or creativity for therapy in the artist, but that the reason why we started creating it all, and the only reason why we became fans of music, is because of the therapeutic element to it. The circumstances of our lives, how we felt rejected, how we felt minimized, how we felt oppressed, or on the positive side of things, how we united inside of music with other human beings to celebrate something. Yes. There's a therapeutic element to the creative equation in the way that we consume it that cannot be overestimated and therefore overvalued in a time when intellectual property, as I've said before, and creative output is so devalued. Yes. Yeah. You cannot, if you take my favorite records, my favorite pieces of work, books, films, whatever, pieces of media out of my life, who would I be? Yeah. Especially those pieces that were important to me during formational times of my life. Yes. That I turned to help me get through something difficult. Those lyrics, those songs, those books, ... Speak about that.
Dude, I love that. I love thinking about the world completely in all white, not in a white supremacist way, in like a way of everyone creating color is drawing on you. All of these ideas are coloring what you are. They're filling your blank canvas in your mind. And there's no way to just get the good on you. You know what I mean? There's no way to just get through life having only bright colors. They're dark ones too. And I love the idea that when you and I have these conversations, when we dive into our own thoughts, our own art, our own songs, our own neuroses, and bring that to life, it's not only therapeutic for us, but it also sort of creates these weird sort of universal synapses for people to connect with as well. It helps me to not feel so alone. It helps me to feel connected to something. It's very cathartic. I love what you said about therapy and art almost being one and the same, or that they can be used in the same way, because I feel like I experience that all the time. And I wonder sometimes, when we talk about how important these things are, and then the way that art and music gets devalued, it's like, on the one hand, do we say mental health is like the most important thing to us, but then we devalue it? We basically say the exact opposite with the way we're not willing to pay for albums, the way we're not willing to support art, at least directly. There's some dissonance there, and I wonder if you gravitate towards that at all.
Well, that dissonance for a professional content creator can drive you insane and make you not have any output because you get lost inside the despair of it, right? And so getting back to the therapy, and a question that you asked me earlier was, how do you balance all of these things? How do you find a healthy way to do what you do, to do life each day, essentially, when you're wearing multiple hats, when you're an adult human being who's trying to pay bills and exist and still be creative and still do the things that you're passionate about and love? It's very simple, actually. Okay. And I'm not always great at this, but I have found, and this is, I hate to do the shameless plug thing, but this is the conversation I'm trying to explore on my own podcast, is when I'm hurting or I'm depressed or I'm anxious, I create. I do the work.
Yeah.
I get lost in writing a podcast episode. I get lost in writing a song. I get lost in writing a book. I get lost in doing graphic design.
I love that.
I get lost in the work, in creative work.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I come out of that 3-hour time warp of creating whatever it is I'm creating, and I love the podcast medium because it allows you to express yourself and tell stories almost as if you were in a counseling session. You are free to talk. No one cuts you off.
Yes.
Unless you have a guest who's really vehement about their point. And in that case, you should shut up.
And just let them do it.
Let them do it because it's probably something really cool that people find engaging. Yeah. But if it's an episode that I'm crafting for myself, I get lost in it for 3 hours and I come out on the other side of 3 hours going perspective renewed, perspective reset, connection with higher power again is flowing.
Initiated.
It's reinitiated. It's re-upped. And I go, okay, this life thing is worth living. I'm doing something that is, I believe, important for the world and is the purpose of why that I'm put on this earth. And the more I stay in touch with that through the work,
yes,
I find that I'm okay. Now, it's really easy getting back to engagement.
Okay.
It's really easy to get so lost in engagement, in getting literally addicted to checking. I'm on Twitter. I'm on I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Yeah. I don't use anything else. Yeah. But I have multiple accounts on each of those for my various entities. I have an entity called the Tin Soldiers that is more of a spiritual exploration of purpose for guys. Yep. For men, I've written a couple of books. I have, a whole thing, brand with that. I have Pioneers Podcast, which is what I've been talking to you about, which is my newest endeavor. Obviously, I have Project 86, which is my band that I started 22 years ago.
Oh my God, it's really been that long, Andrew.
It's been a long time. Yeah, I started when I was 11, so I have a lot of life I have a lot of life left.
I love it. I love that.
I'm just kidding. I didn't start the band when I was 11, but that's a joke for me to hide my age.
But you were serious enough to, I bet.
At 11. Yeah. Well, I had musical aspirations at 13, 12, 13. And I was serious about it. And people thought I was crazy. I'm still crazy and I'm still serious about it.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because it's a little weird. Take it where you want. Do you feel like you had a sexual awakening alongside your musical awakening?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No. For whatever reason, and I think I could pinpoint this, and we're getting into some deep therapy here and some really private stuff, but I will answer this question. My parents split when I was very young. And I grew up in a very small town in Western Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, a town called Meadville, Pennsylvania.
I know
which you do know this town. 15,000 people. It's the next town south of Erie on I-79 on your way to Pittsburgh. So it's the largest town between Erie and Pittsburgh, I believe. And so I grew up as an only child. My mom moved away to another state when I was 2.
Oh, wow.
And my dad and my mom both remarried when I was 5, 4 or 5. And I didn't grow up with siblings.
Yeah.
And I had a disconnected relationship with my mom insofar as I didn't see her that often. Yeah. And my relationship with my stepmom was not emotionally close, nor was I emotionally close with my dad. My dad is a super cool dude, but he is a Vietnam veteran who saw and experienced a lot while he was over there. And so he is not, like many of his peers, an emotional open book.
Right.
He is very reserved. Yeah. He's a very reserved person. And he's even told me as such. I hope he doesn't listen to this because I'm outing him, but not in a bad way, but he probably wouldn't want me talking about this publicly. But he is post-traumatic stress syndrome. He has been dealing with it his entire life because of the things that he saw and went through in Vietnam. And so you're talking about an environment with no siblings in a very small, quiet, rural town with no emotional connection to adults, where I had to get very creative to explore the world, to find truth, to entertain myself, to fight boredom, do all those things. And so this is the fodder for my creative exploits that began at a very, very early age. And now you're connecting sexuality to creativity. I feel like I was in some form sexually curious or not awake, because you can't be awake when you don't. When you're younger than puberty, you know what I'm saying? You don't have an understanding or even the hormonal activity in your body to be sexual in the normal way. But when you are searching for emotional connection as a child, you search for that in any way that you can find it. And that's not to say that like I went to all these crazy places and dark places and all this stuff. But what I'm saying is I was aware of being attracted to girls in elementary school. Now, did I know what that meant physically, like to be sexual with a girl when I was in 4th or 5th grade? No, I didn't know what that meant. You know, maybe I knew what it meant because my dude friends, and I talked about what having sex was because we saw a movie or we heard our parents or you understand what I'm saying?
You saw Jamie Lee Curtis in this one scene.
you get exposed to stuff as a kid and you start connecting the dots and figuring out what's happening there, or your parents talk to you about it, right? My parents didn't talk to me about it ever. We had that conversation. So I figured it out. With years. Did I have an inkling to put the P in the V in 4th grade? No. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like I was more aware or awakened or emotional when it came to that attraction to the opposite sex at an earlier age than my peers.
See,
my peers started becoming active in 6th grade, 6th and 7th grade. That's kids start doing stuff.
People start kind of experimenting. I think for me, I think everybody kind of goes through that. I think what I'm more fascinated in is trying to figure out, like, is there this connection? Because I feel like almost everybody that I talk to will mention that, like, they start listening to music in a different way, or that a song will hit them in a certain way, or that they'll be like, oh, I think I might want to pick up an instrument or just start goofing off on this thing. And it almost always parallels with that time in your life where you're sort of starting to realize, like, that, oh my gosh, like something's happening. Like I think I might be what they're calling a sexual being. Like you start to have all these different ideas.
Definitely. And I can put language to that because I've thought about this many times. And I think when you boil music down, like most popular music, it is about longing and loss. Longing and loss. Either something that you desire that you don't have, or something that you once had that you do not have anymore, that you were forced to let go of, or that you sabotaged. A lot of the music that resonates with people deals with longing and loss across genres. And so you may think that, for example, your band and my band are expressing so wildly different things because the sound is different. It's just packaging. It's just a different skin on the same emotions. And what it is different people processing through those emotions and those experiences with that different skin, right? And so the form is different.
I love that.
But the function is the same. Longing and loss. This is popular music across every metal is about longing and loss. Pop punk is about longing and loss. It's just expressed differently. One dude found himself identifying with a certain group of people, and another dude found himself identifying with a different group of people when they were young, right? And they expressed their longing, their loss, their rejection in different ways. And this gets into another conversation. And that is, there were the 1% of people in your high school that were the popular kids, or maybe 5%, right?
I went to a really, really small school.
We're not talking about overall numbers, quantity. We're talking about percentage. We're talking about there is a percentage. If you went to a small Christian school that had 100 people, 10 of those people were popular.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Or 5 of them.
Yep.
Right. And those were the good looking people and the athletic people. And sometimes those good looking athletic people were also smart.
Yes.
But most of the time, the smart people were not the popular people.
Yes.
It just so happens if the athletic / good looking people were also smart, they were also in the smart category.
Right.
But everybody else in some form wanted to be those people because they got all the attention.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, they floated
to the top. The attention. They floated to the top. And so most of the other people ended up feeling rejected by those people in some form. And that's not to say that every single popular person is a bully or a bad person. Sure. But there is something that occurs when you get all of the attention to all of the other people that they feel left out.
Yeah.
They feel rejected, even if those people didn't necessarily bully them or reject them.
Yeah.
And so all of the rejected people formed other groups to identify with out of that collective rejection. Now, I would argue that in the musical space, those people are called scene kids or hipsters.
Okay.
So the entire movement of scene kids and hipsters is a collective bonding experience that was a reaction or is a collective reaction to not being the popular kids or the strong athletic kids or the good looking kids. And they found another way to identify and reject those people in turn and reject actually everyone else outside of their circle. And so in the musical realm, we have this high school social dynamic working itself out with who fans identify themselves with in terms of musically. And so that is an interesting phenomenon, but it all boils down to longing and loss.
Oh
Music
my God.
doesn't exist without longing and
Andrew,
loss.
this is so good. Because it's like it's a kind of a common theme throughout music that high school kind of plays itself out over and over again, which is why those years are so formative.
It plays itself in adulthood, not just in music.
Yes.
We are all still doing these same things.
Yes.
We're just doing them in different ways.
I think we're also trying to learn how to game the system. You know, like we're going through these 4-year cycles saying, what didn't work? How can I become a happier person? How can I do this with less anxiety? How can I do this more effectively? How can I grow an audience and not lose myself in the process? You know, how can I be a creator of bullshit without eating it too? Like, and I'm still kind of in that phase of like, I don't know, just trying to pivot, like always trying to think like, well, okay, well, what's next? How do I become? And for me, that I would put all of that under self-actualization. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about,
or purpose. You're trying to find your purpose in this world.
And I don't even know exactly what that means or what that looks like or if I'll ever get there, but I know what it doesn't look like. I know more things that don't work now than I did. And I would call that my metric for progress. Is if I know things that are not going to get me there. But also one of the big themes in this podcast that I think you might be able to weigh in an interesting way on is like, as we started the podcast, you know, like we kind of started talking about, well, these were our experiences in the Christian music industry and these were our issues and problems with it and but then we kind of started having deeper conversations about, hey, I actually think I might be going through something here where I don't want anything to do with any of it. Part of the podcast for me has been kind of about me leaving Christianity as a whole, but not in this weird, like rebellious kind of slap in the face way, in a very slow, methodical kind of thinking my way through, meditating my way through, praying my way through this whole thing. And I feel like the place that I am in life right now, I've left pretty much all of it. Like right. I still love this narrative of Christ. There's some things about the Christian church that I absolutely adore. I still love a lot of the pomp and circumstance of it. Like I love the rhetoric and the ritual. I think there are beautiful things in and out of that. But I feel like I had such an awful experience within that to where now in my adulthood, I'm going to therapy, trying to talk through all of these weird toxic thoughts and ideas and things that I went through that I'm still trying to figure out. Is that like just a weird upbringing? Was this a cult that I was a part of? Like what?
Right.
Like why am I so much happier and feel so much more fulfilled and feel like I'm getting all the things that Christianity was promising me the farther away from it I get? That's a whole can of worms to open up.
It's a huge can of worms, and we could have started with that and filled the whole thing and not even scratch the surface. But maybe this is more concluding statements.
Sure.
I don't know what to offer to that other than these ideas, and maybe there's shared space here. I believe that my experience with human beings is not necessarily representative of my experience with God. However, inevitably, the number one way that we experience God is through relationships. Sure. And so where do we find who we are and what we believe inside of all of the brokenness that is modern evangelical Christianity, or just church in general, whatever, Catholic church, Protestant church. Yeah. I grew up in church. I grew up in Catholic church. Yeah. I didn't like going to church. I thought it was boring. I thought it was lame. I didn't understand it. I didn't get any of it. Right. But my grandmother and my dad and my grandfather were very, very devout and especially my grandparents, gosh, the kindest, nicest, most loving, caring human beings I've ever met. And if I'm honest, they are still to this day. I have a picture of them. They passed away in the late 80s. I have a picture of them next to my bed in a frame. Wow. I've written songs about them, but they are and still remain to be this day the most accurate, I think, representation of who God is in my life, because their love for me was unconditional. No matter what I did, bad or good, they always communicated with every ounce of their being that they loved me.
So you equate God with love without conditions? I
do. However, if we're talking about church and we're talking about Christian culture and we're talking about, all of the things that we probably both experienced, I don't know a whole lot about you, but I could probably fill in the gaps, because the modern evangelical movement, which started, I don't know, in the 90s or 80s or whatever, the modern evangelical church movement was a gigantic movement that swept up a lot of people in it. And for me, I became a born-again Christian when I was in high school as a junior, and it was a part of that movement, right? And so I didn't question it. I went to a home Bible study where I saw peers trying to connect with God in what I thought was a very natural, organic, real way. Yeah. And so my response was, all of these people that I've come to befriend as the new guy in school are doing something that's weird to me, but it seems genuine, so therefore I want to give it a shot. Sure. And so I said a prayer, and the response that I felt that I received was genuine and real and spiritual. Now, my journey through Christian culture as someone who is identified as a big part of that culture, especially in the context of my band, it's put me in a position where I've experienced more transactions within culture, bad and good, mostly bad.
Okay. Dude, totally.
More bad than good, and my bad stories, I don't know you, but mine are pretty extreme. Yours may be more extreme, but I've experienced a lot of extremely bad things associated with the system of modern evangelical Christianity. And somehow I have come out on the other side of that, still clinging to faith in Jesus and God. However, there are so many things that I don't understand or identify when it comes to Christian culture, but I'm still a part of it, in some form, because the people that listen to me and buy my music and listen to the podcast identify with it and are looking for validation in their worldview in the things that I put out into the world. Do you feel
like it's your responsibility to help validate things for them, or do you feel like validation just sort of happens because you both happen to have this value set?
I think it has to be organic and real. And I think that's why I still have an audience that identifies with me, even though I don't necessarily make any theological statements ever about anything.
Yeah.
I talk about God in my lyrics, but I don't even use the word God.
Yeah.
You know, we play Christian shows.
Yeah.
I have spoken at Christian events, and at various points in time, I have worked at churches. I will say that right now that I don't identify with the way that church is transacted in our culture very well.
Yeah.
I never have, though, to be honest. Like, I became a Christian not through church. I became a Christian through peers and through groups meeting together because they wanted to at lunch in high school. Yeah. And groups got together on Saturdays because going to parties and hooking up with chicks and getting obliterated made us feel empty.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's how I felt. And I wanted to find something else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so the idea of church to me is like, I've never totally connected, even when I've been working at churches with church. And I've always been very vocal about that. And I've never connected with people who are very like Christianese. Like, I always feel like those people have an agenda that they're pushing.
But they do have an agenda that they're pushing, but people could also look at you, Andrew, and say, well, you have a specific worldview that informs your projected agenda as well.
And all I can do is try to be honest within that. And this is the answer to the question that you just asked, is like I've been sharing this as a part of my podcast, is that my story with Project 86, my creative journey, all these 10 albums that we've created, all the lyrics, is, if nothing more, a story of disillusionment. It is a documentation of me trying to and finding success and failure within connecting with a higher power while experiencing disillusionment with the people and the relationships and the systems around me. And so, can a higher power exist independently of human relationships or independently of the wounds that we exist inside of in reaction to, can that occur? I am not an answer giver to those questions. I cannot tell people this is what you should believe.
God, that's so encouraging to me, Andrew, that you say that.
I can't do that because I'm not in a position to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to do that. And I don't know that other human beings are.
Yeah.
I can tell you what my experience has been. And I can tell you why I believe the things that I believe. But as soon as I get into the realm of pointing a finger at you and saying, this is what you should believe and this is what you should think, then I just think that the whole transaction breaks down.
Yeah, because it's basically saying like my journey is more important than your journey. That the conclusions that I've come to and the things that I have come to believe, I'm smarter, I'm more intelligent, I'm more connected with this, I've put in more hours than you, so why would you not believe what I had to say? Why would you not?
There may be people who listen to this podcast who that's a bummer. Because like one thing that Christians want is like this black and
certainty.
white validation of everything they're doing and everything that they're believing, or the whole thing crumbles, right? And so is it terrifying to say, I don't have the whole thing figured out? I never have the whole thing figured out. People have different views on what the Bible is. I'm not going to make a statement about this and that because I think that there are a lot of different stances that people make within the confines of this document that we have that we call the Bible. I think that we're in a process culturally and have been in a process culturally for thousands of years of trying to figure out who Jesus was, what he was trying to say, and what that looks like for our lives in eternity. And I've come to question, not reject, but question a lot of it. You know what I mean? Because the version of Christianity that I was sold with modern evangelical Christianity is a version of Christianity that I believe has a lot of holes in it. And I can only say that my experience has been largely negative with it.
I just don't know if it works, Andrew.
Does that mean I am not a Christian? I still am a Christian. I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in Jesus, in the Jesus that I think that most Orthodox people ascribe to thinking who he was. Yeah. He was a historical figure that died on a cross, that was resurrected on the third day. I believe that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But what you just said, I don't know if I can make a compelling argument to refute it. What you just said about, I don't know if it works.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works.
But that,
I don't know if I can make a compelling argument to refute what you just said.
But the other thing too is it's like, I've just become so much more interested in the wonder of it all. I just don't know. I really just don't know. And I feel like the most relatable and spiritual thing that I can say to another person at the end of the day is, I don't know. I don't know if it's
I'm figuring it all out. You're figuring it all out. Let's figure it out together. And maybe that's what Christianity is supposed to be.
Yes.
Like maybe there are certain essential things that we have to believe. Call ourselves Christians. Do we have to believe that Jesus existed? I think so. To identify as a Christian, I think you have to say Jesus existed.
Yeah.
To identify as a Christian, do we have to say that we believe that Jesus was a historical figure that taught some awesome things?
Yeah.
I think so. I think that that's probably important.
Yeah.
Do we have to collectively believe that he actually died at one point? Yes.
Yeah.
Because he was a human being. Do we have to collectively believe that there was something miraculous that took place surrounding his resurrection, that he somehow rose from the dead? I think that is the tenet of Christianity that makes Christianity Christianity. I think if you don't believe that in some way, shape, or form, then I don't know if you can identify with Christianity. Now, is it okay to say within that, I don't know what it looked like. I don't know what the details specifically were. I don't know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John like personally, so I don't know how their stories converge. I don't know exactly how their different worldviews affected what they wrote, the time that took the decades between the versions that we have, what changed in the story. There's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the element of it where I feel like it's okay to say, honestly, I went to a Bible college, or I grew up in church, or my parents are Christians, or I'm a Rick Warren disciple, but I'm still trying to figure out all this stuff because there's a lot of stuff in here that the information age has afforded us that raises a lot of really fair questions. That make us go, man, there's a whole world of understanding that I haven't figured out yet. Yeah. And I need to read a lot. I need a lot more books. I need to talk to a lot more people. And I need to come at this thing from more of a student being educated rather than the teacher.
Yes.
Or the professor or the PhD. I'm not a PhD in Christianity. I'm a PhD in writing about my emotions, in how my human experience has affected me in the form of songs and books. I've done that a lot, know, but I'm not an authority on everything with the human experience or God. I can tell you what my experience has been.
Yeah.
And I have some people that listen to me because they like my music.
Yeah.
That's as far as my authority goes.
See, I'm so glad that this is where the conversation went, because
but this is where culture is too. I'm not saying anything that everybody else isn't also saying right now. A lot of people are coming to these same conclusions.
Well, yeah, and I think you have to weigh. To me, this is where the goofiness and the jokeability of the whole thing makes me a little happier. Because if I can sit there and say, I don't know, then I can continue the conversation. But I can't sit in any more conversations in which one person has to be right and one person has to be validated in their beliefs. Like on the show, we have a lot of different people that come on. A lot of them subscribe very much to it sounds really similar, like what you're talking about, like a healthy way of saying, this is what I believe. I have my reasons. It may not be for everybody, but this is me. I'm not excluding anyone from the party because this is my choice of beliefs. And then there are people on the exact opposite end of that who are like, no, I have I feel like I have just as much reason to disbelieve all of those things, but I still want I want everybody at the table. I want the people who are totally on board with it to be here, and I want the people who are holding it at arm's length to be there too, because they thought about it just as hard. They've searched just as long. I just thinking about people's realities and the experiences that they have as humans. It's like at any given point in my life, I could have had an experience that turned me in a totally different direction, and my heart would have felt that to be true. You know what I mean? Like, definitely. So I don't know. I feel encouraged when I get to have conversations like you, where you're thinking about it, but you also, I feel like you and I have so many different things that we can relate to because of all this weird, like evangelical Protestant mishmash that's been happening for the past 15 years.
It's very difficult to go through what we've gone through in terms of playing music in the Christian world and not come to a place of questioning because so much of it is commerce. So much of it is commerce driven by an idea of Christian consumption that I don't think originated from the people who consume it.
It feels more like capitalism than Christianity.
Yes, and that is the conclusion that I keep coming to. Now, I feel like I should make some sort of definitive statement about where I'm coming from as a human being right now, just so that people walk away with this, at least having an understanding of what I am trying to say. Okay. What I'm trying to say is that I still identify with Christianity. I still believe in God. I still see God answering prayer in my life. But as far as the transacting of how that looks in the way I deal with other human beings or church, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that looks like. And I've never known what that's looked like. Like, I've spoke at festivals and churches and things about God and about my experience or about what I think I've learned in terms of the Bible or principles of spirituality. And those things have changed over the years because my experience has changed, or I have new information to add to my collective pool of belief, but I don't think I could ever say at any point in time I've ever had the church thing or the how relating to God transacts into relating with other human beings thing figured out. I don't know if I've ever had that figured out. I don't, and I think, yes, one of the biggest turnoffs to the unbeliever or even the person who grew up as a believer to Christianity is the dogma of it, right? It's like there's all of these definitive black and white statements made about so many different things, but when you deconstruct them, there's a lot of holes in it. And it's hard not to come to that conclusion if you look at it objectively. And so that's my definitive statement is it is okay to be figuring out a lot of this stuff. And I don't see that in any way, shape, or form not cool with God. I think that's the whole point, is that our whole lives is that we're supposed to be kind of figuring this thing out, because we're not God, if that makes sense. I mean, but I also I greatly, deeply understand the things that you've expressed in terms of where you're at right now, based upon your experience.
Yeah, I know. And we could talk about that for a year. Going back. Yeah. Like,
we're easily. An hour and a half into this thing?
And I know that you have to go, and I want to be a good steward of your time. I want to be a servant's heart.
Thank you.
Your time. I want you to come back on the show sometime this year. If you would be willing to,
definitely do it again.
If we need to like cut this off and you're like, Matt, your show is bullshit, I don't want to come back on it again, that's fine.
No, not at all, man. Not at all, man. I'm always up for an engaging, educated, mutually empathetic conversation with anybody else.
Awesome. I love that, Andrew. I'm looking forward to our next encounter.
Yeah, same here, Matt. Thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for thinking of me.
11T Life is a production of Rock Candy Recordings and Rock Candy Media. Every time you subscribe to 11T Life, a unicorn disembowels your greatest fear.